I'm delighted to be here this morning. And so what David said about dueling models, that's actually not true. I always follow in his steps. So don't tell him that because his head is going to get too big. Um, so today what I want to do is talk very briefly and very generally about what we understand time series models are. And uh, this is going to be important to recognize the different models that we are going to be covering in the course of of this event, particularly tomorrow when we talk about comportamental models and Kalman filters and state space models. So I thought that a very brief and very general introduction to time series was appropriate. So the information that you're gonna see is you can find it everywhere um, on the web and any statistical book. So I am not gonna cover that at a very rigorous level. It's just an overview. And so the statisticians in the room, I'm gonna be very loosely talking about the terminology. So my apologies in advance. So we are going to start by, thinking about what a time series is. Is a collection of values that is generated by a process, and they are indexed by time. So you get time number 1, 2, 3, 4, and you collect information. For example, the the smoking prevalence in the U.S., the number of new COVID-19 infections daily, the uh, you know, number of individuals infected with the flu every year. And so what we want to do with time series is understand where they're coming from, what the data generating process is, try to forecast where that time series is going, to control the process also. So can we intervene in the process so we can manipulate it? Reduce the number of infections and so on and so forth. So I am going to, for example, this is example of time series, this is the adult smoking prevalence, with two different surveys, the NHIS and the NSDUH data. This is smoking prevalence from the 1990s to 2014 for NIH, and NSDUH is from 2001 to 2000, yeah, 2002 to 2014. So what is that we want to do with smoking with information about smoking prevalence is pretty much to figure out where that's going, what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years. How can we develop targets for smoking prevalence? How we can control the process? Is there any way we can do in reducing initiation rates or cessation rates so the process slow down, and how much we can slow it down? So this is the kind of thing that we want to study. Now, there are two main scenarios in which we study the time series. One, or analyze time series. One, we know little about the process that generated the time series. We just see the data, and then we try to extract patterns from the data. Oh, the data has trend, and the trend has been consistent, so I'm going to extrapolate the trend. Oh, it has seasonality, so it's ups and down, ups and down. So uh, every you know every fall you see increases cases of the flu, and then they go down and they go up and they go down. So that is what this repeated patterns is what we call seasonality, and we can extract that from the data and repeat that in the future. So we don't know what happens. We just know that it's happening, and if we want to forecast the future, we better um, use that information. And um, and other patterns that I'm going to be talking about in the time series. But the second part, the second way in which we can analyze time series or time series data is if we have an idea of the process that generated the time series. This is called structural models. And well, we have an explanation, a causal model or a model in general that produces the data. And that model is, the model is control, if you want, or is moved by internal variables that sometimes you don't see. They're called latent variables or state variables, depending on the terminology that you use. And that's the generates the observation that we see. And if we understand that process, we have the flexibility to either control and make more accurate analysis about where the process is going. Okay, so what I'm going to do today in a few minutes is just talk about the first part. So we are not going to use that very much because we are, this is what we do most of the time is modeling, right? So we actually try to create some causal, explanation for what happened. But this is actually an important part of the study of time series. So as I said, in pure time series analysis, we just look for consistent patterns in the data, and then we can extrapolate the patterns to forecast the future. We can look at also the data and filter the data and say, okay, I want better estimates of where the time series was at a certain time, and just take the noise of the observation that was, that I collected. And the kind of patterns, as I said before, can be trends, seasonality, impacts are important, so pulses, some interventions, if you want. There are some other interventions that change either the trend of the time series or the shift the time series, the level changes, and we can even if we don't understand why that happened, we saw that happened, and if it repeats, then we can incorporate in our analysis. If it doesn't, well, at least we can understand if it is not just an outlier and noise. We can correlate that with what was happening at the time that we collected that data that could produce that outlier. So I am, in order to study time series a little bit more, give a structure to the what a time series analysis is, we need to go into some basic definitions. So a time series, so what we want at the end for a time series is to have a stationary time series. So if we get a time series that we devoid, we subtract the trend, seasonality in the data, and we just have a process that has constant mean and constant variance, right? Then we speak about that time series as being stationary. This is not formally what stationary means, or because time series can be defined as an stochastic process of different random variables that are distributed, identically distributed. They might not be independent, but they are identically distributed. That we want the stationarity mean that the mean, there's a constant variance that the mean exists in the same, and so on. Now, when we understand when we have a process that is stationary, so constant mean, constant variance, the most uninformative time series is what we call, the white noise. And white noise is if you analyze at any different time the time series, those random variables, the random variable at any index at time 1, time 2, time 3, those are going to be independent or at least uncorrelated um, of other other data in the analysis, and then you don't have one info, so they don't carry any structural information that can inform what any patterns in the data. So this um, what we call that white noise is come from signal analysis. So uh, if you analyze a signal at different frequencies, so if you any kind of um, type of information, and you just take a look, decompose that at different frequencies, you can see that at any frequency there's the same power of at any frequency in the time data. So there's no one that is preferred than the other, and that's similar to what you do when you decompose light, right? The white light is made of all frequencies, to be mixed at the same power. And so when we say white lies, then we translate into white noise in the data. So that terminology comes from that. But if the data that you have has certain pattern that is related to itself. So if you see a high level at time t, then you expect to see a higher level than the mean at time t plus 2 or t plus 3, and then t plus 6, and so on. So is there any patterns that you can see that these variables are correlated, or what we call in this case, because it's the same time series, is autocorrelated, that we can we can understand, we can extract that information and use that to describe that time series, and better and better forecast and better understand the variability of the time series and the uncertainty that we have in predicting the time series. So um, so how the taking the mean, taking the mean out, taking the trend out, taking seasonality out, there are standard techniques to do that. That's not too difficult. Then what happens when you have all that gone and you have these autocorrelation patterns? Then what we want to do now is model that time series. We create a model in terms of things that we can understand. Let's say white noise process, or innovations, or shocks that are independent and identically distributed, but we combine them to produce the same autocorrelation pattern that we see in the data. And then what we do is mimic, the data, and infuse that autocorrelation pattern, and then we can have a better representation of the time series. This is what we there are different models to do that. One is the autocorrelation, the autoregression model is expressing, besides seasonality and so on, expressing the time series at time t on some weighted or patterns of series in the past, and or moving average, which is expressing as weighting the present as weighted components of the errors terms in the past. And so when we combine those two processes for parsimonity, so we can actually combine the autoregressive and moving average process, so to get a more succinct um, model that creates the autocorrelation structure. So we call that ARIMA models, autoregressive moving averages models. And on top of that, when the data, we need the stationary data. So we need the data to be identically distributed, right? When we have not independent, but I think identically distributed, constant mean, constant, um, uh, variance, so the second moments and so. But when we don't do that, when we don't have that, when we don't have that, and the series has trend, then a way to take the trend out is just to take differences from the data. So to take, so if you have a data time t and you subtract the data at time t minus 1, then you hope to remove that tendency to grow from one period to the other. And sometimes you need to do double differencing. So you have differencing one, the time series, and then the resulting series you difference again until you get the series stationary. And that differencing is what we call the integration part of the time series. So when we remove the number of lags that we need to go and perform, on the number of differences that we need to perform in order to render the series stationary is what we call the level of integration of that series, and that's the I. So we introduce an I in the ARIMA model for integration, right? And that's come to we come to have what we understand by the ARIMA models, which is the autoregressive integrated moving average model. Okay, so ARIMA models then can be considered as a special type of a regression model in which the dependent variable has been stationarized. That means you use difference the time series in order to get stationary time series. And then you model the autocorrelation structure with the past lags of the data, right? And also past errors of the error residuals of the data with the predictive value. And then you have what we call after we take the we take the difference we render the series stationary, then we have this type of a structure, which is the ARIMA part of the structure. And this part here, this is the mean, and this is this part here up to P is the autoregressive part, and these are just weighted components of the past errors. Then this is the moving average process. So we could, in some time, in some occasions, there's no one characterization of a time series. If you take a look at the autocorrelation data and partial autocorrelation data, the function, there's no one representation. You want to get the best, the most parsimonious representation that mimics the autocorrelation structure of the series. And so this is when we got the formally talk the ARIMA models. This is also called the Box-Jenkins models. So it's adding difference into the ARIMA process, and the P is the number of lags that you take for past data, so for autoregression, and the Q is how many lags of the errors you take in order to you know represent the future. No, I'm sorry, in order to represent the time series. All right. So there are. So the point is right now is that we don't know why the data performs in the way they performs, but we are trying to just squeeze the last level of structure in the data in order to just say represent that or forecast the data in the future and say, I don't know what happened, but it has happened in the past, and I hope that's gonna happen. I trust, or I have like the leap of faith that is going to perform the same. So there are there are different ways in which you can accomplish that. There are computer programs that you're going to be looking at some of them when you talk later on about joint point regression. This is perform one of those kind of analysis, but the idea that some software should analyze the time series, determine if it has trend, determining it has seasonality, just going through the whole time series and figuring out the autocorrelation structure at every single lag possible, and then take that seasonality, take that trend out, difference the time series, and then creates a parsimonious model of the autocorrelation and estimate the coefficients of the autocorrelation structure. So all these coefficients, phi 1, 2, up to p, and theta or 1, 2, and so on to q, they are estimated from the data. And they are estimated usually using maximum likelihood. And if you assume that your error, the innovations are normally distributed, independent and the innovations, right? Normally distributed, then the a simple, or not a simple, but a regression type analysis, minimizing least squares or weighted least squares, is equivalent to doing maximum likelihood estimation, and then you have your estimated coefficient. So you can actually do that in Excel if you want, or you can do that in any kind of software, and you just create a guess of your estimates, and then use something like Solver, or use a little program in R just to minimize the difference between your estimates and the data that you have and get your process going. So one of these models, for example, is called Autobox, that I had used some time ago to examine time series analysis. And if you take a look at Autobox, so we have a time series, and obviously has trend, and but out of that, I cannot exactly determine what is the structure of that series. So Autobox just examined the series and created a model, and then created forecast. So the fit of the data is in green, and then the upper limit and the lower limits of the forecast are expressed in at the end here. So you can see that the structure of the forecast it's not a simple structure. So we have ups and downs, and they have some trend, and this is actually interesting, right? So where did this pattern come to represent, to get that ups and downs here? And take a look at a more disaggregated or zoom in um, part of the forecast. So and so this is at the end what the software figured out that was the best representation of the data. So things that are not um, random, they or things that you cannot call part of the randomness of the data. There was a seasonal pulse at period 3 in 1991, then the seasonal pulse in 1988, and so on. So this is actually the observation number, and then we have periodicity of 3, 9, 11. And what I mean seasonal pulse is that every 3 time periods, then you got this pulse. Every 9 time periods, then you got this pulse. And the pulse is represented here. And that pulse is not random, right? So you can actually look at extrapolate the pulse. So there are some pulses that happens once. They are not, they do not repeat. And those are in 1998 and 2001. And then we need to get explanation of why this pulse occurred, but it's not, a random occurring. So they are, subtracted from the error term from the data because that happens something there. And this part here is the autocorrelation structure that was estimated in terms of this notation. This is the lag operator, the lag operator. So and that B. So what we have is this A is the error terms, the innovation, right? So we don't have an autoregression structure, but we have a moving average structure. Okay, so those are the A here, and we have the autoregression structure that T-1, and this is T-2, and these are the coefficients, right? Of the moving average structure. So what it means is that this time series doesn't have a lot of memory in terms of past data, but it has a long memory in terms of past innovations, right? And the innovations of the series in the updates of the series, if you want. And this is a give you an explanation about what in more layman terms what the data what the results mean, so you can actually forecast with that and create the analysis. This is the original autocorrelation function and the partial autocorrelation function of the time series. The autocorrelation function is simply the autocorrelation between data time t and the data at each lag of the observation. And so how correlated IT to IT-1, IT y of t to YT-2, and so on and so forth. And the partial autocorrelation function is the same thing, but controlling for intermediate variables. So if we want the partial autocorrelation function between IT and IT-5, then we get that correlation after controlling, after you regress the IT and IT-5 in IT-1 to -3 and -4, and the residuals, you take the correlation. So between the two, we can determine the more or less what is the moving average, the moving average structure, or lags that you need for the moving average, and the autoregressive structure, or the an initial idea of the how many lags that you need for the past data. So um, this is in essence, these are important models to study. They have been very successful in predicting the future. They have been very successful in understanding where the time series is going. There's not a lot of information unless you put more structure in the model and regressors and stuff like that, that you can understand you can do something with the time series. You can control it, and you can determine where it goes, and to put some information on your own. But uh, they are simple. They are compact. They are easy to calculate, and for the most part, if you have a good representation of the autocorrelation structure, and you get the data, the components of the data, and then whatever you have at the very end is pretty much white noise. You take all these structures of the data, and then you examine the residuals, and what you get is just a constant, or if you want, zero mean, and there's no autocorrelation structure between any of the so you have a flat autocorrelation structure that is zero. Sorry, not flat, just zero. At any lag, then you extracted all the information you want with the data of the data. So what we are going to really focus more, in the rest of the workshop, is how if we know something more about the data generation process, how we can incorporate statistical models with the structure that we think that we understand, the causal model, in order to create more accurate predictions of the future, but also have better explanatory power and control over the time series. So that's it for now. And again, this is just a very, very brief view of what we want to accomplish. Just take this time series out of the way, and then let's focus a little bit more on the structure of the data and how to analyze the data. Okay, thank you.